They printed trillions of dollars, and they thought you wouldn't notice. Not the number itself, because numbers like $6 trillion don't mean anything to a human brain. They're too big, too abstract. You can't picture 6 trillion of anything. But you noticed the rent. You noticed the grocery bill. You noticed that the salary that used to feel comfortable suddenly didn't stretch the same way. That's not an accident. That's not the economy. That is the direct, traceable result of a decision made in a room you were never invited to. So here's the question we're answering today. How does a government print trillions of dollars out of thin air, and somehow most people never even see it happen? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to look at every dollar in your wallet differently. And you're going to understand exactly why so many people are quietly moving their savings into assets the government can't print, starting with Bitcoin. Let's get into it. Point 1. Money isn't printed with a press anymore. It's typed. Here's the first thing that shocks people when they learn how this actually works. There is no giant printing press in a basement somewhere, churning out stacks of $100 bills. That image is comforting, honestly, because at least you could see it happening. What actually happens is quieter than that, and scarier. The Federal Reserve creates money by typing a number into a computer. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. A few keystrokes and billions of dollars exist that didn't exist 5 seconds earlier. They use that new money to buy financial assets, mostly government bonds and mortgage-backed securities, from banks. The banks now have fresh digital dollars sitting in their reserves. Those banks can lend that money out. And that new money starts moving through the economy, chasing the same amount of goods, services, homes, and stocks that existed before it showed up. Between 2020 and 2022, the Fed's balance sheet exploded from around $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion. That's trillions of dollars of new money created with no new gold, no new oil, no new houses, no new anything backing it. Just belief. Just trust that the dollar in your hand still means what it meant yesterday. And here's where it connects to you, right now, watching this. This is the exact reason people started paying attention to Bitcoin in the first place. Not because it was trendy, because it was mathematically impossible to do this to it. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Nobody can type a new number into a computer and create more. No committee, no vote, no emergency meeting. The supply is fixed by code, not by policy. That's not a marketing slogan. That's the entire reason the asset exists. Point 2. Inflation is a tax that never passes through Congress. Nobody voted for your savings to lose value. Nobody sent you a bill, but you paid it anyway. This is the part people miss, because they're taught to think of inflation as some kind of weather event, something that just happens, like rain. It's not weather, it's policy. It's a direct consequence of expanding the money supply faster than the economy grows. Think about it like this. Imagine a small island with exactly $100 in circulation and 100 loaves of bread. Each loaf costs $1. Simple. Now imagine the island's government secretly creates another $100 overnight and hands it to a few people. There are still only 100 loaves of bread, but now there's $200 chasing them. Prices don't stay at $1 a loaf. They creep toward $2. Nobody stole your bread, but your dollar buys half of what it used to. That's what happened at scale. Between the stimulus checks, the emergency lending programs, and the trillions pushed into the economy during 2020 and 2021, the US money supply grew faster than at almost any point in modern history. And by 2022, inflation in the United States hit levels not seen in over 4 decades. Here's the part that stings the most. The people who feel this hardest are never the wealthy. Wealthy people own real estate, stocks, businesses, assets that tend to rise in price alongside inflation, sometimes faster. The people who get hurt are the ones holding cash, the ones with a savings account, the ones doing everything right by saving instead of spending. This is exactly why a growing number of people started treating crypto trading and blockchain assets not as gambling, but as a hedge. Not because every coin goes up, it doesn't, but because a small allocation into an asset with a provably fixed supply is one of the only tools an ordinary person has to opt out of a system where the rules can be rewritten while you sleep. Point 3. They didn't print money. They printed debt. Here's something most people never connect. When the government prints money, it's usually not printing cash directly. It's issuing debt, bonds, and the central bank is buying that debt with newly created money with using newly created money. That means every dollar they print is tied to a promise that gets paid back later with interest using future tax revenue. Future you, future your kids. The US national debt just crossed $35 trillion. Let that number sit for a second, because it's not just a headline, it's a countdown clock. Every year, more of the federal budget goes purely toward paying interest on debt that already exists, before a single dollar is spent on anything else. Roads, healthcare, defense, all of it competes with interest payments that grow every single year. And here's the trap. When debt gets this large, a government has basically 3 options. Raise taxes dramatically, which is deeply unpopular and slows the economy. Cut spending dramatically, also deeply unpopular and politically almost impossible at this scale. Or the third option, the quiet one, the one that doesn't require a vote. Inflate the debt away by printing more money, so the debt gets paid back in dollars that are worth less than the dollars that were borrowed. Historically, governments almost always choose door number 3. It's the path of least resistance. It doesn't require asking permission. It just requires patience and a population that doesn't notice what's happening until it's already happened. This is why so many crypto investors talk about Bitcoin as digital gold. Gold has survived every currency collapse in history because no government could print more of it. Bitcoin was built with that same principle, translated into code that lives on a blockchain nobody controls. When trust in printed currency erodes, historically, capital doesn't disappear. It moves. It moves toward things that can't be diluted. Point 4. Why didn't prices explode immediately? The delay is the trap. Here's a question that confuses a lot of people, and it's a fair one. If they printed trillions of dollars in 2020, why didn't prices skyrocket the next month? The answer is velocity. Money doesn't cause inflation the instant it's created. It causes inflation once it starts moving through the economy, once it's spent and spent again and spent again. In 2020, a strange thing happened. People were locked down. They couldn't spend on restaurants, travel, concerts, gas for the commute. So a huge portion of that newly created money sat still, in savings accounts, in investments, parked, waiting. Velocity was low. Inflation stayed muted, even though the money supply had already exploded. Then the economy reopened. All at once, that stored up money started moving. People traveled, people renovated homes, people spent the stimulus checks that had been sitting untouched. Combine that surge in spending with supply chains that were still tangled from the pandemic, and you get the perfect setup for the inflation spike that hit in 2021 and 2022. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The money had already been printed a year earlier. The damage was already done. You just couldn't see it yet. It was sitting quietly in the system, like a match already lit, just waiting for oxygen. This delay is exactly why so many experienced investors don't wait for inflation headlines to make decisions. By the time it's on the news, it's already baked into prices. The people who protected themselves were the ones paying attention to the money supply itself, to what the Fed's balance sheet was doing, months, sometimes years, before the effects showed up at the grocery store. That's the entire appeal of tracking on-chain data and macro indicators instead of just watching headlines. You're trying to see the water rising before the flood, not after. Point 5. The cycle always repeats, and that's the part they're counting on. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't the first time, and it will not be the last. 2008, the financial crisis. The Fed launched what was then considered a radical, unprecedented program of money creation to save the banking system. At the time, it was treated as an emergency, a one-off. It wasn't. It became the playbook. 2019, the pandemic. They didn't hesitate this time. They printed faster and larger than 2008 because the last cycle had already proven the model worked, meaning nothing collapsed, at least not immediately, at least not in a way most voters connected back to the printing. Every single time, the pattern is the same. A crisis hits. Printing trillions becomes the solution. Asset prices rise for those who already own stocks, real estate, and businesses. Inflation eventually creeps in and hits the people who don't own those assets the hardest. The gap between people who own appreciating assets and people who only hold cash gets wider. And a few years later, everyone acts surprised when it happens again.
This is why understanding this cycle isn't just interesting trivia, it's a survival skill. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every recession, every stimulus, every emergency intervention starts to look like the same move, wearing a different headline. And it's exactly why blockchain technology matters beyond the price charts and the trading apps. At its core, a blockchain is a public ledger that nobody can quietly edit. No central authority can add a few extra trillion tokens to Bitcoin's supply during an emergency meeting on a Sunday night. The rules are transparent, and they're the same for everyone, forever. That's not a small thing. That's the entire point.
The takeaway. So let's bring this all the way back to the beginning. They printed trillions of dollars, and they were right. Most people didn't notice, not in the moment it happened. They noticed later. They noticed in the grocery store. They noticed in the price of a home that used to feel achievable. They noticed in a savings account that technically grew, but somehow could buy less than it could 5 years ago. That's not bad luck. That's not just the economy. That is what happens every time when a system has the power to create unlimited units of the very thing you're told to trust and save. You can't stop them from printing. Nobody watching this video controls monetary policy, but you can control where you put your understanding and where you choose to hold value going forward. That's the entire reason millions of people started paying attention to crypto trading, to Bitcoin, to blockchain technology in the first place. Not to get rich overnight, to opt out of a game where the rules can change without your permission.
Money that can be printed infinitely will always be worth defending yourself against. Money that can't? That's worth understanding. If this connected some dots for you, that's exactly what Cryptia is here for. Every video on this channel is built to help you see what's actually happening underneath the headlines, not the noise, the mechanics. If you want to keep seeing the pattern before it repeats again, subscribe to Cryptia, hit the bell so you don't miss the next breakdown, and drop a comment telling me what topic you want decoded next. Because the people who understand the system are always the ones who move first. I'll see you in the next one.